Ray Brown is a business coach, entrepreneur, and co-founder of ArchiBiz, a global consultancy focused on helping architects build profitable, sustainable, and well-structured practices. Ray has spent over 25 years operating at CEO level across multiple industries and international markets, including the United Kingdom, South Africa, the United States, and Australia. Through ArchiBiz, he has worked with architecture firms around the world, helping architects better understand leadership, financial management, business systems, growth strategy, and the realities of running a successful practice. He is well known for his direct and transformative approach. Ray is passionate about bridging the gap between architectural talent and business success, challenging architects to think beyond design and develop the entrepreneurial mindset needed to thrive in today's profession. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Ray Brown. Hi Ray, welcome to Architects Corner.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm fine, how about you?
Very good, very good. You're a long way away in Africa, and I'm here in Australia. But
Wow.
I do have a Scottish accent, so.
You're welcome to Architects Corner. Thank you for joining us on this conversation on the business of architecture.
Yep.
And why architects fail at business. So our viewers, by the end of this conversation, you will understand why architects fail in business and exactly what to do differently. So Ray, please, let's start here. Why is being a good architect not enough?
All right, so I first of all need to tell you that I'm not an architect. Okay, I'm a business person, and I had a long business career in Scotland before I came to Australia. I've been a business coach for 20 years. And for the last 7 years, I've been helping architects specifically. And the issue with architects is that they don't get taught about business at architecture university. They get taught how to be good designers, and almost they get taught that architecture is good and business is bad. And if you make money from architecture, that's not really good. It's about the art and the design. And I think that mindset is the biggest problem that architects have. And it's the biggest problem actually that we have. Our company's called ArchiBiz, and we provide business education for architects around the world. But our biggest competition is the narrative that says architects have got to struggle, architects don't make money. Why would you learn about business? Because that's not what architects do. And it's such a mistake, because the architects that we deal with who do learn about the basics of business, they actually can do really well, and they can make money and live a less stressful life than most architects. And they can employ people and build really successful, fun, sustainable and exciting businesses, and do really good architecture work as well. So you don't have to compromise your architectural output to build a good business. There's no, you're not selling your soul for business. You're actually in business, and you need to learn how to run a business so that you can build the right foundations and build a business that just works.
Thank you so much for that. That's a good place to start, because I was just going to bring you some statistics that says that over 70 to 80% of architects feel underpaid. Many work for 45 to 55 hours, especially a week, and yet compensation hasn't kept pace with the demands of the profession. Do you think the root cause of architecture struggles is a lack of business or entrepreneurial mindset?
I definitely think it's the reason that architects are underpaid is
Yeah.
because the businesses that they work for don't sell the value properly of architecture. Well, architects are very bad at selling value. They're very good at selling concepts of pictures, and you only have to look at architecture websites, and typically what you see is lots of pictures of buildings, and the message is almost, if you want a building like this or something we've done before, come to us. When really the value of architecture is much, much more than simply design. And I think architects need to realize that there are many architects who can deliver a good architectural design, but there aren't that many architects who are prepared to explain and work with the problems of running an architectural project from the client's perspective. And every sale, when you think about it, every sale begins with a problem. Someone's got a problem and they buy something to solve that problem, whether that be an extension to their home or a new house. They will have a problem that they're trying to solve in doing that. So if architects focused more on the problems that they were solving rather than the outcome that they're achieving, then they would be, I think, a lot more successful. Because really the clients don't understand what architects do. And architects are not very good at explaining what they do. So it's hard then for the client to evaluate the service and compare one architect with another. But when you think about it, the architectural fee is a very small proportion of the build cost. And therefore saving 10 or 20% on the architectural fee is really, it could cost you a lot of money in the long run if your project goes over budget or takes a year too long or really goes off the rails in some form. That's where the value of the architect comes in. But they need to be much better at selling that value to potential clients and setting themselves apart from other architects who typically are just saying, we'll design something like this for you. Do you want one of those?
Okay, thank you so much. You just mentioned about how the value of the architect, how to differentiate yourself in the industry. So now I'm wondering, what does it actually mean to think like a business owner as an architect?
Well, and architects don't like me saying this. Architecture is a very simple business. Okay, the product and service is very complex, but the business model is very simple. You buy hours, your own and those of other people, and you turn those into invoices. Okay, there are no factories, there are no vehicles, there are no long production lines that you need to operate. The business model is simple. So if you can convert hours into invoices and money efficiently, then you will have a successful business. But that involves pricing properly, finding the right clients, positioning yourself properly in the market, really understanding the mechanics of how your business works, putting financial systems and processes in place so that you can monitor progress. Because quite often what happens in an architectural practice is the clients are very demanding and the projects are very demanding, and people forget about the interests of the business. The business needs to be looked after too, and quite often that gets forgotten about. And architects think if they just work harder, then it'll all work out fine in the end. But quite often it doesn't. That conversion of hours into money is very inefficient, and they don't make the money that they thought they would make when they set the fee in the first instance.
But then, what are the real business challenges you've seen architects face today?
I think the key is thinking that they don't need business education. Okay, I think we describe starting your own business a bit like driving a car. You wouldn't jump in a car and drive off without any lessons. And yet people do that with a business. They jump into business. They sometimes drift into business in architecture. They're doing some work on the side, and that gradually becomes greater to the point where they think, I can start my own business. but they get no education. They just start off, they fly by the seat of their pants. We have lots of architects who say to us, when it comes to business, we feel like a well-meaning amateur. And that's such a mistake because, as I say, architecture is not that complex a business, but like any game, and business is a game, if you don't know the rules and you don't know how to play the game, then you are going to make very basic mistakes. And they're easy to avoid if you set up the business properly and follow the rules of the game. You should be fine.
Mm. You just mentioned following the rules of the game. And I was just thinking, when did you realize personally that architecture and business are two different games?
Well, I think to me it was always obvious because I was dealing with architects who were very frustrated, sometimes disillusioned, certainly not making money that they could. And I dealt with lots of other businesses. I did many businesses of my own. And when I went to speak to architects, they really didn't even have the basics in place. They had no financial reporting mechanism. They had no monthly strategic thinking in the business. It was really a case of work really hard and get the deadlines met and get the work out the door and we'll all be fine. And sometimes many architects have said to me, I don't know how much profit I make until after the year end. And then my accountant tells me how we've done. That's too late. You need to know in the moment whether your practice is successful financially or not. And really the three areas of a business are finance, operations, sales, and marketing. So finance comes first. Finance is your scorecard, and it's a bit like playing a game of football or soccer or rugby without any scoring system. Running about the pitch and kicking the ball, and you imagine a tennis match without any scoring system. It would become very boring, very inefficient. People would not watch and not play. So the scoring system in business is equally important because it is a game.
Right. Oh, thank you so much for that illustration. And you've just talked a little about structuring an architecture firm. And I was just wondering, when it comes to structuring an architecture firm, what are architects completely getting wrong?
Well, quite often architects don't differentiate between themselves and the business. Okay, so they may call themselves Mary Smith architects or Bob Johnson architects, and everything revolves around them, and private money becomes caught up with the business money, and effectively it is a job that they end up with. Whereas in reality, they need to see themselves as CEO or managing director of their own business. They're an employee of their own business, and it's the business that has vision and culture and structure, values, all of those things. It's much better if you can keep them separate from the practice owner, because if you don't do that, then all roads lead to the practice owner. Every decision gets made by the practice owner. Every question gets answered by the practice owner. And that is incredibly inefficient. So even for a very small business, the ideal is to structure it like as if it's a big business. So imagine it is separate from the owner. Imagine that you are the CEO of your own business. And what we tell people is you should meet once a month, effectively in what we call a board meeting. And it sounds very grand. It sounds like that's big corporate. But boards exist for a reason, and they exist that once a month you spend a bit of time, maybe an hour or an hour and a half, actually looking at the business from the different aspects, the finance, operation, sales, and marketing, and from a strategic perspective, not in the weeds of the projects, but looking at the reporting, what's working, what are the trends, what's working well, what's not working, what does the business look like in 6 months' time or a year's time, not just next week. And we find that we teach architects to do that. We've got a program called the Fast Track MBA, which is the Master of Business for Architects. And in 6 weeks, we give architects all these basic tools that they need to run an architectural practice and to think differently about architecture and business. And we've got a record of proven success with architectural practices all over the world who not only do the owners of the practice get what we call a market rate salary, so they get the same salary at least that they would get working for someone else, but then the business makes a profit of 15 to 20% on top of that, because that's what a good and successful business should do, to allow for investment, training, development of staff.
No, thank you so much. Now, I would want us to go into the practical part of this conversation. If you were setting up an architecture firm from scratch today, how would you structure it?
Well, I think the structure perhaps is less important than the knowledge that you get to set up the practice. The structure of the architectural practice from a legal perspective could be a sole trader, could be a limited company, all of those things. That's more for a lawyer to answer. But in terms of the operational structure of the business, I think it's the monthly board meeting, the financial reporting. Effectively, there are what we call the 4 Ps in an architectural practice. There's the practice itself, and that needs to be profitable and well run and appropriate reporting. Then there's the second P is the project. So you've got to run your projects efficiently. So you could have a successful practice, but a mix of projects where some are successful and some are not. And you need to know that difference. Then the third P is the people. So you need to get the people efficient and use the capacity that you've got, utilize the people properly. And quite often, if you don't manage that and monitor that properly, you'll find that you've got some good performers and some not so good performers, and you don't know which is which. And then the fourth P is the perception of the practice, internally, out and externally. Who do you want to be? Where do you fit in the market? How do you tell your story in a way that differentiates you from other architectural practices? And architects, again, are quite bad at telling their own story in an interesting way. So in terms of structure, those are all the things I would put in place. I'd make sure that the practice, the projects, the people, and the perception were all clearly set out, documented, and thought about before you start the business.
Thank you so much. If you had to prepare a young architect for the real world in just 6 months, what would you focus on?
I think if it depends on the personal vision for the individual. If the individual is working for a big firm and is looking to progress within that firm, then I think that's one scenario. And then I think the advice would be to learn about leadership. And we speak in our program about the difference between the technician and the leader, and we call it the technician to leader transformation. As you go further up in an organization, you need more leadership skills and less technical skills. And that the leadership skills are about communication and coaching and mentoring and financial astuteness. So if you want to be valuable within a firm, again, it comes down to learning your business and leadership skills. If you aspire to own your own business, and a lot of architects really would like to be in their own business, if that's how you see yourself in the future, if that's your vision, then it's really important that you prepare yourself with the business education that you need. Don't assume that good architecture is going to lead to good business. It's the other way around. You need to have a good business that allows you to do good architecture and attracts the right clients at the right time, at the right price. Okay, and it less. We find that what architects, particularly if they're running their own business, what they want is more certainty. If we could just get more certainty, and that certainty falls into 3 areas: certainty of workflow, so you want the right jobs at the right time; certainty of income, so you want enough money coming through the door to pay for the bills; and then certainty of impact. So nothing I'm saying about architecture or business means that you've got to do bad work. I think you want to make a good impact on the built environment, and you want to do good work that you're really proud of, but it's a strong business that allows you to do that and stops you picking up work that you don't want to do just to pay the bills. Okay, we meet so many architects who say, I just had to take that job on. I didn't want to do it, but I took it on because I needed to pay the bills. And that can cause lots of stress and frustration, bad relationships with clients, not making enough money from the jobs. So properly structuring the business in the first place. That's how I would look at my career if I was an architect. I'd make a choice early if I was going to run my own business or if I was going to progress within a big firm.
Okay, I would want us to dwell on someone transitioning to running their own business. What do you think are the first business skills they must learn?
Yeah, well, I'm in danger of repeating myself, but I think the first thing is financial astuteness.
Yeah.
Okay, so that you don't have to be an accountant to run a business, but you do need to know the difference between a profit and loss account and a balance sheet and a cash flow. Okay, those are the three key financial tools. And if you don't learn those, and I meet many senior business people, I tell the story that I was 38 and I had 3 businesses and I still didn't know the difference between a profit and loss and a balance sheet. And when people come in our MBA program, typically nobody knows the difference. Okay, and which is a shame because, and I blame accountants for that. They keep the knowledge secret. And a profit and loss and a balance sheet is very simple. It's not complex. And if you get the right systems and processes in place from a financial perspective, that makes life really easy. I think the second thing would be a degree of specialization. So I think lots of architects tend to say, well, we could do work for anyone. We can do commercial and we can do retail and we can do residential. We can do big jobs and small jobs. And then it makes it very difficult for the client to decide whether you're the right architect for them or not. So positioning is really important. And we use the analogy in our MBA program of the motor industry. So if you take Suzuki and Ford and Rolls-Royce, they're all very well-positioned brands. And how do we know that? Well, we know that there's not many Suzuki buyers drifting into a Rolls-Royce showroom or vice versa, because they know that the product's too expensive or it's not what they really want. But sometimes it's hard to tell from an architect's website whether you're a Rolls-Royce or a Suzuki or a Ford, okay, because they're just pictures of buildings. Words are really important when it comes to positioning, and we need to tell the story of our practice. And so when I'm starting out, I would need to give some thought to what kind of work do I really want to do? What excites me? Where can I add the most value? And how do I tell that story to my potential market?
Thank you so much. You've also mentioned that you've been in business for over 20 years. And I'm wondering what systems or roles must exist in a firm to actually grow beyond the founder?
Okay, you said roles. What roles
Yeah.
need to exist? Yes, yeah. That's a really interesting question. And how architectural practices typically grow, and I think I've been in business a lot more than 20 years, but this gray hair is a lot more than 20 years hard work. So typically what happens is architects grow, they get more work and they add more people, okay? And that's a very inefficient way to do it. We call it get busy, get help, okay? So we get really busy and then we go in the market and we try and find someone to help us. And what happens then is that you don't have enough time to train or induct people or to share the values of the practice. So it's really important that and again, this comes back to the financial forecasting and budgeting. You need to plan out the work that you have and the work that you need to find to justify employing people early enough so that you can do that efficiently and properly. And you're not being pressurized around the work And that's the only reason that you get a new person. I think the other role within, particularly a small architectural practice, the role that we find makes the most difference is the office manager or the admin person. So if you get a good admin person that can help with proposal writing, financial reporting, supporting the owner of the practice, that can make a real difference. If you can get to a critical mass where you can justify an admin or office manager, then that releases the owner to do higher value work, and they're not doing bookkeeping in the evening and work that's really inappropriate for them to do as an architect. So in terms of the roles, I'm not the person to advise whether you need graduates or associates or principals or directors, those things. That can be different for different practices. And it depends on the kind of work that you're doing and the clients that you're looking to attract. But if you're a small business, we find that the solo architect is a very difficult business model, because you find yourself doing high value work and low value work and making the tea. Okay, you're doing everything. So really the first thing for a solo architect to do probably is to get a graduate or someone who can help with the more menial jobs, to free the owner of the business to do marketing, higher value work, and build relationships and networks out in the market.
You talked a little about pricing and positioning. How should architects actually price their services?
Okay, that's a great question, and that we could spend a long time speaking about value pricing versus hourly pricing. So, setting the price for a project should follow a number of steps. So the first step is to get the brief and understand the project, and then based on your knowledge and experience and the research that you've done, calculate how many hours of how many people are going to be required to do that job. Okay. You can then value those hours at a cost rate. Okay, not charge out rates or anything, just a cost rate. How much is it going to cost you to do this job? Right. So now you've got a price. Let's say calculated all the hours, and that comes up at $20,000. Then you go and negotiate with the client. And interestingly enough, there is no connection between the cost price of anything and the selling price of anything. The cost price should be the lowest that you can achieve to get the quality that the client needs. So that's fixed. And then the selling price should be the highest price that you can get and still leave the client, if not smiling, then a little bit reasonably happy with the price. Okay, so that becomes a sales job. Back to what we spoke about in the beginning, about solving problems. And if you do the selling job properly, you can boost the price. As soon as you start speaking about hours and how many hours, and that's not, architects are not paid for hours. They calculate hours, but they should be pricing, if at all possible, on value. How much value am I creating for the client? And clients effectively buy two things. They buy confidence and they buy perceived value. Confidence that you can deliver what I want and solve my problem at a price that I think is fair. Okay. And that price is it's a story, it's a sales job, it's a presentation, and it needs to be. I was speaking to one of my clients yesterday, and she said, I can do everything fine and I'm really good up until the point where I've got to say, this is going to cost you $20,000 or $30,000. And she said, I get very nervous and I get very anxious about laying the price on the table. Now, the client is going to pick that up. The client is going to realize there's something not quite right here. I wonder why this person is being like that. You must confidently ask for the business and put your price on the table. I would love to do your job. We can do a fantastic job for you, and it's going to cost you $25,000. Okay. And look someone in the eye and be confident when you present the price. And the chances are that if you've told the story right and you've convince the client that you can solve their problems and deliver them value better than the architect down the road, then you will get the work.
Well, sometimes I feel that architects are a little scared of calling prices or talking about money. Why do you think so?
That's a great question. I think it comes back to this, what we spoke about right in the beginning, that money is somehow dirty and it's not the art and it's not the design.
Yeah.
And I think that's perpetuated by architectural universities. So a number of years ago, I was on a panel at a conference, and the audience was 300 small architectural practices, and they were all struggling to get going. The theme of the conference was the business of architecture. And I was there with one of my clients, and we were speaking about how successful they'd been and the changes they'd made. And there was an architect on the panel with me, grey hair, a bit like me, and he took the microphone and he said, what you people have got to remember is we're not a business, we're not an industry, we're a profession. And that to me was really stupid. I mean, what does it mean? It just, of course, architecture is an industry, and of course it's a business. This idea that architecture is a profession and it's somehow different from other businesses is such a mistake, because that becomes an excuse for not learning about business. Well, we're different. We don't need to learn about business, but people come to us because they know what we do and they need an architect. Well, these days that's not working. People are going elsewhere. They're going to project managers and building designers, and AI is coming along. That's going to be a real issue for certain aspects of architecture. So architects are going to have to figure out how they maintain their value. And they'll only maintain their value by explaining that value to the client. Okay. And if we're speaking about marketing, marketing and sales, people are always quite scared about sales, particularly architects. Oh, that sounds like selling insurance, or it sells like double glazing, or selling used cars. But we ask in our program, we tell architects they need to reframe that. So marketing and sales is the bridge between someone's problem and your solution. Okay, simple as that. And if you build a good bridge between that problem and your solution, people will cross the bridge and come to you. And your bridge has got to look more attractive than the other architects, because they all have bridges. They've all got websites, and they've all got, they have meetings and things with clients. You've got to look at every opportunity you can to make your service and your offer stand out better than anyone else. Right. And one of the things that we speak about a lot is, what do you call the thing that you give to your client? And people will say, oh, well, everyone calls it a fee proposal. Okay. Why would you call something a fee proposal if you don't want it to be only focused on price? Okay.
So
it's the wrong
what do you
name.
call it instead?
Well, we suggest something like a client offer.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. So it's an offer to solve a problem when you think about it. Yes, there is a price there. So there's a lot that you can do with proposals. The typical architect will tell, when I say to them, so what's your process, sales process, they say, well, we'll meet the client and we get very excited about the brief, and we hear all about the projects and the vision and the dreams of the client. Then we sit down and we prepare a proposal, and we get reference pictures, and we do all those, and we spend a long time on that. And then what do? Oh, we email it to the client. Okay. No, you must never email a proposal. It must always be presented so that you can get the process right and it doesn't become a focus on price. If you email a proposal to someone, they're going to go to the last page and they're going to check the price first. And if the price is not right, they're not going to look at the rest. Right. So really important that you present your proposals, and I wouldn't call it a fee proposal. I would call it something a little bit more attractive and enticing.
Thank you so much for these bits of information, and it's been amazing so far. I think we can now. So, Miss Ray, what does a truly sustainable architecture practice look like today? And how can architects better position themselves for that?
All right. So we spoke earlier on about the three certainties: certainty of income, workflow, and impact. Unfortunately, those are the outcomes that we're looking for. We need to come to the other end, which is the source issues. And there are really three source issues that people need to focus on. One is systems and processes. So you need to look at what are your systems and processes? Have you got the right systems and processes? And those need to keep evolving. The second opportunity is skills. So business skills, leadership skills, communication skills. And this is an ongoing process to constantly be getting better at improving the systems and processes, improving the skills. And the third opportunity is the mindset. So how do you think about business? And quite often in architecture, there's what I would call a scarcity mentality. No, there's a shortage of work. Nobody's got, we don't have enough work to do. We're going to run out of work in a few months' time. I think if you change the mindset to there's plenty of work out there. Architects are not closing down. Some bigger architectural practices are laying off people. Yeah, we know that. But in terms of small practices, if you want to continue to be an architect, then that's a choice. Okay, you don't have to continue running your own architectural practice or even being an architect. You can go and learn some other skill and do something else. But if you choose to continue in your own business, you can compensate for any problems in the market by improving your systems and processes, improving your skills, and changing some of your mindsets that may be limiting. Yeah, okay. So we spoke earlier on about the three certainties: certainty of workflow, income, and impact. Those are the outputs. The other end of the equation are the source issues of systems and processes, skills, and mindset. So keeping your systems and processes improving, having a mindset of continuous improvement in your practice, keeping your skills developing, whether they be communication skills, leadership skills, finance skills. There's always more to learn. And I think architects, like every other business owner, needs to be constantly learning, constantly improving. And I think that mindset is what will make the difference between a good, particularly in today's world with, as I say, AI and that, the world is changing, and I think we've got to change with it. If you become too set in your ways, and this is how we've always done it, and this is how architecture is, I think that's a very dangerous mindset.
Thank you so much. I would want us to talk about the opportunities and the future. Where are the biggest untapped opportunities for architects right now?
I think the biggest opportunity is to educate the clients and educate the market. I think architects have been very poor at actually telling the market what they do and how they create value. They've relied very much on pictures of buildings and output, the end of the story, if you like. And quite often the phrase that we hear quite a lot is, let your work do the talking. Okay, let your work speak about what you do. And that's such a mistake, because you need to tell the market who your ideal client is, where you fit in the market, what makes you different, how you solve problems better than anyone else, and not leave that to chance and the client. So those are the things that, if you want a sustainable architectural practice and you want to stand out in the market, you need to get your positioning right. And positioning is made up of 4 elements: product, market, service, and price. And all of those you need to think about in your architectural practice. How do you price your product? And that can be, you can be the Suzuki or the Rolls Royce. You can be at either end of the spectrum or somewhere in the middle. Which market do you serve? Get really clear on that. We speak about your tribe. Who's your tribe? Who are you trying to attract? The product. How do you describe the product, and how do you deliver that product? And then the service. How do you provide a service that can be different? And we have lots of clients who put a lot of time and effort into differentiating via the service. So they do things that are different from other architects. There are always opportunities to do that.
Thank you. You talked a little bit about business models earlier on this conversation. And I'm thinking, what business models should architects be paying attention to?
Well, I think the business model and architecture is quite simple. The legal structure might be different. And I think that's for an accountant and lawyer to advise your viewers on what is the best structure. Sometimes, depending on the tax regime in different countries, you can incorporate as a business at a certain point, or you can stay as what you would call a sole trader, or maybe you've got a partnership. But that's not for me to really comment on or advise. I think the business model is really, it's about this efficiently converting hours into money. Okay, so what is the structure for the type of clients that you have? How many graduates do you need? How many medium experienced architects do you need? How many leaders do you need? And quite often when we start with clients, we find that the structure of the business is not right, because maybe 4 or 5 people have started a business together. They get very experienced, but then the business becomes top heavy. You've got 4 really experienced people and maybe not enough people below them to do the grunt work, if you like. In which case, sometimes partnerships need to split up, and you need to, reconfigure the business, because that can be difficult, because people at the higher end are they want to work on high-end work, they want to get high-end salaries, and sometimes it can be hard to construct a business that delivers what everyone wants, and still make profit at the end of the day.
Thank you so much. It's been an interesting conversation so far on the business of architecture. Right now, we'll take a few rapid fire side questions that
Yes.
are not in line with business, but just to get to know our guests on Architect's Corner. And the first question is, you mentioned you've been in Australia for 30 years?
20 years, yes.
Yeah. What do you find interesting about Australia?
The people, and the landscape, and it's a very young country, so it's very confident and lots of vision, knows where it's going. It's growing very quickly, lots of infrastructure projects happening. And people are very proud of being Australian and living in Australia, which is very different from somewhere like the UK or Scotland, where people can be a little bit negative and everything's broken. And so I would say Australia is very positive. I absolutely like that aspect to the country.
Interesting. What's your favorite food in that country?
Favorite, I would say Chinese food. We have a very good Chinese restaurant that we like to visit, usually full of Chinese people. Food in Melbourne is excellent. I think there are more than 5,000 restaurants in Melbourne, and the quality of the food is exceptionally good. So I enjoy any kind of food, but I like Chinese. Tonight I'm going with friends to a Thai restaurant. I'm sure that'll be very good too.
Maybe one day you try Nigerian food.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. I mean, what's the favorite dish in Nigeria?
It's soup.
Soup, okay.
Yeah. You can corn, or you call it vegetable soup. Has a lot of vegetables and meat.
Vegetables and meat. Oh, sounds good. Sounds like a Scottish soup.
Oh, wow. Okay, so to wrap up this, if there is one message you want for every architect watching this to leave with, what would it be?
If you want to run your own architectural practice, get business education. Find someone who can teach you the basics so that you're not flying by the seat of your pants or being a well-meaning amateur, and you'll end up working too hard and you'll become disillusioned, and it's just not as easy as you thought. And the fact that you're a good architect and you've done some really good projects is not enough. You need to do that within the infrastructure of a well-run business. And if you don't want to do that yourself, you've got to get someone to help you to do that and run the business while you do architecture only. But typically the owner of an architectural practice needs to be the managing director and the CEO, and needs to know a little bit about business to really just be an insurance policy against failure.
Okay, I would also want you to mention a little bit of how someone can reach you, especially if they want to get some business information or structure to their business.
Yep. I'm Ray, R-A-Y, at archibiz.global. That's ARCHIBIZ.global. And the training program that we have is the Fast Track MBA, Master of Business for Architects. And that runs as a live program with over 6 weeks, 90 minutes a week. There's also the Business School for Architects on the school platform. That's SKOOL /ArchiBiz, ARCHIBIZ. That's free to join, and there's lots of free resources in there. We'd love to have some of your viewers in the business school, and that you can ask questions in there. You can get in touch with me. You can speak to other architects and access the free resources. So yeah, we've lots of ways that we can help your architects to become better business people.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be on Architects Corner with us. Thank you for sharing from your valuable insights, and we are grateful to have you. One thing we normally do on our shows is we normally ask our guests who they would love to see next on Architects Corner. Please, can you do us the honor of suggesting?
Well, I saw that question on your email, and two people come to mind.
Okay.
One is Nikita Morel, who's based in Australia, and she is a copywriter and very active on LinkedIn, very active in helping architects. She specializes in architects. And the other one is a gentleman called Ian Motley, Motley, and he runs a business called Blue Turtle Consulting, and they speak about pricing in architecture and how to write better proposals, and very specific on that. He's a very experienced. He's not an architect either. He used to work for Foster's in London and worked on some really big tenders. So he's got some very good excuse me, information on the psychology of pricing, which I think is really important for people to understand.
All right, thank you so much. If you also have their contacts, you can do well to share with us and let them know that we'd love to reach out to them for a conversation on Architects Corner.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, Rose, and you keep well. And I haven't asked you much about you, but it's been all about me and running a better architectural practice. Hopefully speak to you again soon.
All right, have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. I hope with this conversation, you were able to structure your architecture business really well. Thank you for joining us on Architects Corner, and see you on the next video.